No. Okay. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa, also known as Nifty. I'm here today to talk about Bitcoin. So it's kind of kicking off an hour here of talks. You're about to hear from some other really smart people working in Bitcoin. To kind of like lead in, I wanted to give sort of maybe what I kind of think of as like a state of the chain address, sort of, kind of like where we've been in Bitcoin and where are we going as a protocol. Before we start, a little bit about me. I've been working on Core Lightning for about half a decade at this point, and last year I started a project called Base 58 where I teach the Bitcoin protocol for devs. So it's a pretty technical class. Yeah, and I'm on Twitter. You can follow me there. Cool. Okay. Oh, and here's a little bit about my Bitcoin Protocol Academy, Base 58, if you want to find more info. Great. Okay, let's talk about Bitcoin now. So the story of Bitcoin really begins as a story of consensus, right? So Bitcoin kind of set out to solve this like age-old question of how do a bunch of people kind of agree on what the current state of play is. And Satoshi Nakamoto came up with this idea to use something called proof of work to decide on the current state of the chain. So Bitcoin is really like the first working implementation shipped project that used proof of work for consensus. And they term this like, this is like a new thing in distributed computing, like from like a PhD side, like research area. Proof of work is, now they call it Nakamoto consensus, and it was really like the first time that someone proved that this was something you could use to agree to consensus. So that kind of came out back in 2009. It was a simple idea. We'll use proof of work, we'll decide consensus, and this simple idea revolutionized the world. Cool. So we've come a long way since 2009 when Bitcoin was released. Let's kind of see where we are and where we're going. So in the last over a decade, I guess we're getting close to 15, 14 years now, transaction volume has grown. We're in the millions now of transactions on the chain every year. And the market has largely decided that this is a valuable token. This is a screenshot from yesterday, so no promises on the current value thing. And then across the ecosystem of tech projects, in addition to just having Bitcoin on chain, Bitcoin has one of the most diverse layer 2 ecosystems on any chain. So just to kind of quickly walk through what some of these layer 2s are, there's one of the first side chains that was ever launched over half a decade ago. That's the Liquid side chain. There's the Lightning Network, which is a different type of L2. It uses channel protocol to pass payments. There's Wrap Bitcoin, where we took Bitcoin and bridged it to a different chain, so it has bridges. There's two new cool projects that are using eCash tokens, so Xiaomi and Mints, to do second layer transactions. That's both the Fedimint project and Cashew. And then we have another new kind of interesting project that's doing something totally different as an L2 called State Chains. That's Mercury Wallet. So Bitcoin, these are all different protocols. They all do different things, and they're all different ways of transacting with the same base asset, which is Bitcoin, in a totally different new protocol, which is cool. So there's a lot of cool and interesting stuff that's happened on Bitcoin on the layer 2 perspective. Okay, so let's kind of like walk through sort of what the history of Bitcoin has been from a soft work perspective, what that sort of is enabled for us, and maybe where it's coming for the future. So we've slowly been adding like new capabilities with every soft fork to the chain. You notice that these are kind of slow though. We had our first kind of big soft fork in 2017. It took 4 years later for us to get Taproot, which was the most recent thing. I don't know when the next soft fork will be or what it will be, but at the end we'll see that there's a couple new contenders for where Bitcoin is going in the future. Cool. So with SegWit in 2017, what did this get us? SegWit really enabled the first kind of big layer 2 project on Bitcoin, which was the Lightning Network. This was proposed in 2015, but wasn't able to launch until I want to say 2018, as we had to wait for SegWit to get activated before Lightning Network could go live. Lightning is really cool. It's one of the most, I like to say it's one of the most decentralized layer 2s in existence. There's over thousands of people running nodes and thousands of Bitcoin committed to channels. And I don't know how many payments are made on Lightning every day, but it's definitely a lot. So that's really cool. Great. So we have a cute little Lightning flag. After SegWit, we got into Taproot. Taproot is kind of like this, larger, more complex version of Bitcoin that helps unlock better privacy. It kind of gave us this new thing called ordinals inscriptions, which maybe some of you have heard about, and is really kind of leading this renaissance of ideas of how to bring new kinds of layer 2s to Bitcoin in addition to what we already have, as well as like soon new zero knowledge proof ideas, et cetera. Cool. So just kind of a quick overview for those of you who aren't familiar with ordinals. This is the first ordinal inscription that got committed to the Bitcoin blockchain in December 14th, 2022, so a little over 5 months ago. That's because it was using Taproot, which makes it much easier to write data into the chain. So now people are putting data objects like JPEGs into the Bitcoin blockchain, which is cool. Taproot also makes it a little bit easier to make commitments to things. This is letting us kind of like, or letting projects such as like the RGB protocol or other such projects add commitments to kind of other assets. So this is how people are bringing other asset chains or other asset tokens to Bitcoin by making commitments that you're able to put in Taproot. I should note that this was definitely possible before Taproot, but Taproot makes it easier and I think has really inspired people to come up with new designs, which is really cool and interesting. And then it also makes these massive multi-sigs possible. So basically, this is a picture from mempool.space, which is a really nice Bitcoin block explorer that shows you this transaction that came out in, I think it came out in October. A researcher made a Bitcoin transaction that had a 998 of 999 signatures, which is something you couldn't do prior to Taproot. So basically, this lets it, Bitcoin used to have kind of a limited number of people that could be on a multi-sig. Now with Taproot and TapScript, this new update that we have, it's possible to build these incredibly massive multi-sigs. So you and all your friends and everyone you know and the next 999 people could all get together and collectively own Bitcoin, and only if 998 of you agreed to sign to move those coins would you be able to move them. So I think this is going to kind of opens up opportunities for new ways of moving and holding Bitcoin than we had previously, which is really cool. And finally, Taproot makes sending secrets transparently much easier. Typically, what this is good for is it lets you make trades happen whenever a signature gets posted to chain, or if you have an oracle that's going to produce a result, you can hide some of the results in the signatures that the oracle makes, and then depending on the data in the signature, which is hidden, that's why it's called like a scriptless script, it's a secret that's kind of hidden inside of a Bitcoin signature, someone else can then see that signature, use data that they pull out of it, and then accomplish some of their tasks, like finishing a trade or a swap, or unlocking, I don't know, something that they needed a secret for. So there's some info on it. This is just kind of from a scriptless scripts Git repo that some of the Blockstream research team has been putting together on how they can use some of the new Taproot primitives and signatures to do cool passings of secrets using on-chain sigs, which is cool. Okay, cool. So that's a pretty fast and brief overview of some of the cool things that we've had, where Bitcoin has come from, what we've added with Taproot, some of the new things that Taproot has enabled. Where are we going? What is next for Bitcoin? What comes after Charizard? I don't know. Okay, great. And I think as a community in Bitcoin, this is still something we're trying to figure out. Here's a few of the things that I've been kind of watching or keeping eyes on in terms of where and what the new things that we might be getting in Bitcoin next. The first one is we're probably looking at getting new script opcodes, or maybe even a totally new scripting system, something like Simplicity, which is a project that Blockstream Research has been working on for probably over half a decade at this point. So this is a proposal that would be a soft fork that allows different kinds of Bitcoin contracts to be written using a different kind of like basically programming language. So don't hold me to that. There's other things, new script opcodes and something like Simplicity with script primitives. What does that unlock though is this big thing called covenants. So one of the things that I think as a technical Bitcoin community, we're trying to figure out whether or not we want to add, and if we do add, in what way, is this idea of covenants. So A covenant basically makes it such you can do more complicated assertions of where Bitcoins can be spent to, such that you could write a script that is valid not just for a single transaction, but a series of transactions, I think is the whole idea. And this allows you to do more complicated things with Bitcoin. Cool. So one such proposal that gets you something sort of like a commitment is this Sigcash flag cuts Sigcash any prev out, but there's a bunch of other ones. There's a lot of other proposals. This is just the one that I think is probably has the most people thinking about and building ideas on top of at the present time. One thing that Sigcash any prev out, as it's sometimes called, or APO for short, is on Lightning. There's a new change that we need called L2 that will really make Lightning, I think, a better, easier to run, makes the amount of state you need to run a Lightning node a lot smaller. It also has been used for this new layer 2 proposal called space chains, hence my little astronaut on a chain. It's kind of like a space chain, I don't know, okay. So yeah, so APO is going to unlock, hopefully, a Cambrian explosion with these script updates and new covenants, both of layer 2s in terms of maybe some zero knowledge rollups that you could do as a layer 2 proposal. I've seen a few of those floating around. As well as just, yeah, so I think a lot of new kind of layer 2 stuff will come in the future, depending. And as I mentioned, maybe we'll get some zero knowledge layer 2 protocols, et cetera. Maybe even with this new scripting language, like Simplicity, you'd be able to build zero knowledge verification into the Bitcoin blockchain, et cetera. So there's a lot of kind of new places that Bitcoin can go. There's a lot of proposals, there's a lot of new ideas. I think a lot of people are really excited about these new proposals that they're coming out with. So part of some Bitcoin core developers have spent some time over the last year and a half being like, hey, there's a lot of really cool proposals that people have made at this point of where we could go next after Taproot. Now that we have Taproot, we've got a lot of proposals for how to do covenants, et cetera. Wouldn't it be great if we could get a preview of the future on Bitcoin without having to launch it to the whole network first? So what they've done is they've built something called the Inquisition Signet. How many of you know what the Inquisition is? The handful. Okay, so this was like back in Spain, and I want to say like the 1300s, I don't know, a long time ago. A bunch of Catholics came around and like they sat people down and were like, okay, are you really like, do you really fit in with the Catholic Church, right? I think it was the Catholic Church, I might be wrong about that. It's one of the churches. And they're like, okay, prove to us that you deserve to be like, I guess it's like continue living, right? Or are you something that we're gonna toss out, right? So the Inquisition Signet is they've taken a bunch of proposals and they're going to give them an opportunity to be activated on the Signet. Just as like a term of phrase, Signet stands for Signature Network. Basically, it's a test network, which is live, that anyone can participate in. You can see it on block explorers, but it doesn't have, the coins don't have any value. It's very similar to test network on any other chain. So here's a list of the soft forks and some of the relay policies, which we didn't really talk about today, that are being proposed and that are currently, I think, in process of being launched or currently activated on the Inquisition Signet. And I just saw a project yesterday, which is the space chain thing I was talking about a little earlier. Someone just launched a new space chain like project, like implemented it and launched it as a project on the Inquisition Signet using any prev out, which is the BIP 118, like the first item in this list. So it's cool to see that people are actually using Signet and actually trying out, okay, now that we have these new possible ideas, what are the cool new possible things that we can build using these new things. So hopefully this Inquisition Signet and these new software proposals and all of the builders that are currently using them to build new and interesting things will help us figure out where we should go next and what of all the proposals that we could have of how to add covenants or how to move forward with new types of scripts, which of these are ones that are actually useful and what of them actually kind of sticky, which of them actually stand up to the Inquisition and are just considered to be a good addition to the network as a whole. Great. Okay. So there's a lot of other. I've tried to cover, I think, today a lot of kind of like the history of like the soft forks, what we got out of these soft forks, and where the soft forks are going in the future. There's a lot more that's going on in Bitcoin than just the soft fork stuff. I wanted to name just a couple of cool things that are like possible kind of on Bitcoin today and don't require soft forks, like Miniscript, which is a new way of kind of expressing and writing Bitcoin contracts. Coin swaps, which is a way of exchanging Bitcoin in such a way that it makes it a lot harder for a third party to tell who sent coins to who. Wabi Sabi is a way of kind of doing a similar thing as a coin swap, but it's just a more technical protocol that lets you exchange Bitcoin and like big coin join things. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of other stuff going on. I've just kind of touched, I feel like, the tip of the iceberg in terms of soft forks, but there's a lot of other cool and interesting things that you can look into if you're interested. That basically wraps up my talk. I've got a few minutes, so I just wanted to spend 2 seconds pitching my conference, which starts tomorrow here in Austin. It's going to be at the Palmer Event Center. It's called Bitcoin++. We're going to be looking at all of these layer 2s that I've talked about here today. Most of our talks will be on Saturday, so if you're going to be in town and want to come hear from some of the best builders and minds in Bitcoin that are working in the layer 2 space, they're all going to be here in Austin on Saturday. And so if you want to come, there's still some tickets available. You can check us out on btcpp.dev. That's everything I had. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see some of you guys on Saturday. Cool.